Half a decade on YouTube and still not monetized. Oh well. Here's the Q&A I promised. Thanks for these 5 years. The first 2 questions are really similar, so I'll just count them as one and the same. Why have you chosen to focus on national team football? Do you watch club football too? If yes, who do you support? What made you decide to start a YouTube channel on international football? I don't have a good answer, it just sort of happened. I care about club football too, but that YouTube genre is extremely oversaturated, so I wanted to stand out in my own niche. I'm not literally the only one here, but excluding my prediction videos, my content is unique. It wasn't just from a marketing standpoint though. I do also care a bit more about international football for some reason. Behind every national team is a country with a history, geopolitical problems, etc. Maybe it's got to do with my interest in history and geography. That's probably a factor. There's just more underlying interesting things to make videos about when it comes to international football, in my opinion. It of course exists in club football too, but not to the same extent. But yes, as I said, I do watch club football too. I support 2 teams. AIK, or AIK, who last played in the Champions League the year before I was born, which is pretty unfortunate timing, and I also support Manchester United. I support AIK because of my father, and I also support Manchester United, and it's not very, well, I guess it's a pretty cute story. It's because the club was mentioned in a kids show. I'm not sure what it's called in English, maybe something like Horrid Henry. The club was mentioned there, and I support it ever since. The very first United game I watched, not live mind you, was the 2011 Champions League final, which really tested my loyalty because Barcelona was just so superior, but I stood by United and support them to this day, so I am a loyal fan through thick and thin. What is your favorite topic of football? International football, if you want to count that as a topic. But to be more specific, right now I really like exploring what-if questions and doing studies. It's also fun to do predictions. If you've been following my channel since its inception, you'll see I initially altered between standard national team documentaries and other stuff. But now I haven't made such a video in over 1.5 years. So we'll see when the next national team documentary is. I can't promise anything, but I'm sure I'll make some in the future. Don't hesitate to tell me some video suggestions in the comments. As long as they're about international football in any way, I'm open to hearing them. I'm always looking for more ideas. Who is the player you admired the most while growing up? Zlatan Ibrahimovic, of course, as I'm Swedish, but he's number 1 by such a big margin that it's unfair. In a very, very distant second is Cristiano Ronaldo. Probably stems from me being European and mostly getting into football when Barcelona were past their prime. So I just saw a lot of Real Madrid in the Champions League, and Ronaldo, of course, by extension. And I didn't really follow La Liga domestically, so yeah, the Champions League is the main arena I saw them in, figuratively speaking. And no, I'm not saying Ronaldo is necessarily better than Messi. I wish I didn't have to clarify that, but if I don't, someone will write a 10,000 word essay on why I should commit to not alive. If we're including former players, I really love Zinedine Zidane as well. He gets an honorable mention. To this day, I get goosebumps whenever I watch Zinedine Zidane, Maestro of the Decade, and I recommend you watch it immediately after you're done watching this video. Name 1 player of each position, goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, forward, you wish were Swede. Alright, goalkeeper, I just want a complete lunatic in goal. So Peter Schmeichel comes to mind, but I'm probably gonna go with Oliver Kahn. If I can have Oliver Kahn like he was during the 2002 World Cup, then he's definitely my choice. People, they don't realize just how bad Germany was in 2002. Like, they were arguably weaker, or at least as weak as the likes of Sweden and Denmark. Oliver Kahn, he completely carried Germany. If Germany had, only had a good goalkeeper and not an amazing goalkeeper like Kahn, Germany would have definitely not reached the final. So it's incredible. A bit tarnished by the error in the final, but I mean, it ultimately didn't matter. And he's the only goalkeeper to win the Best Player award. Not just the Best Goalkeeper award, the Best Player award, which is just completely insane. As a defender, I'm just gonna play it safe. Paolo Maldini, yeah, I just love him. He feels a little bit more grounded than Kahn. So they could complement each other pretty well in that regard when it comes to temperament. Maldini can of course be aggressive, but I think it's aggressive in a good way. It's like aggressive challenges, but still fair. He wasn't like Materazzi, for example. So yeah, I really like Maldini. I also appreciate players with longevity. I mean, he played, was he 39 in the Champions League final? Well, I think so. Well, he was approaching his 40s at the very least. Moving on. All right, midfielder. I did mention Zidane, so you might think I'm going to go with him, but unfortunately I can't really do that because of his temperament. It's sometimes boil over, and I can't have my midfielders just start raging and get sent off in the middle of important games. So no Zidane here, but I do really love him. All right, I want a team that's guaranteed to get goals. If I have Kevin De Bruyne and Erling Haaland, I think I'm guaranteed to get some. I know I'm not saying that these 4 players are the best in their respective position, but I'd want them to be Swedish. And I think it's a bit too boring and predictable to choose Messi or Ronaldo, so this is the route I'm going with. I also want to choose Haaland because it's a bit annoying that he's Norwegian. I'm pretty close to being Swedish, but whatever. You can't get everything you want in this world. But I do actually still really like him. What makes a perfect World Cup for you, including on and off the pitch? Alright, so the most important thing is that Sweden qualifies and reaches the round of 16 minimum. If that happens, a lot of other downsides can be excused, which I'll get to later. I also prefer if it's hosted by a free country, so I'm not a fan of Qatar hosting it or Russia in 2018. But yeah, I mean, free is very subjective, but I don't think, homosexuality should be legal, women shouldn't be oppressed. I'm not too fond of slavery either, unpopular opinion. But don't get me wrong, if you only look at the 2022 World Cup from gameplay-wise, it was one of the greatest tournaments ever, so I won't take that away from them. Right, it also has to have a lot of goals and few controversies, but not completely devoid of controversies. Then it's too boring. But an example of a World Cup that was too controversial was the 2002 one. South Korea is... if you haven't watched highlights of South Korea's knockout stage matches, I recommend. I watch those and I feel infuriated. So I can't even imagine what Italians and Spaniards are feeling like, because they were completely robbed. It's not just 1 or 2 incorrect decisions. It's complete robbery. And that World Cup was not helped by Sweden losing in the round of 16 to a golden goal by Senegal. That wasn't a refereeing scandal though, but it's still heartbreaking. Anyways, a bit of a tangent there. Let's move on to the next question. What are your favorite games from AIK and Man United? The first AIK match I attended was in 2007. It finished 0-0. The next one finished 3-0. Oh, did I say 3-0? I meant 0-3, because we lost 3-0 at home. And the third was the last match ever played at Råsunda, which was also the venue of the 1958 World Cup final. It was against Napoli, and Edinson Cavani scored a last-minute penalty. So that was not too fun. So my favorite AIK game is when I finally attended a game we won, which was in 2018 against Brommapojkarna. We did fall behind early on, but thankfully we came back and ultimately won that match 5-1, which was incredibly satisfying. And in the end, we did win the league that season, which was, of course, amazing. When it comes to Man United, it's either the 2011 Champions League final or a 2-1 win against Watford. I'll explain why in a bit. The Champions League final might seem bizarre because we were outclassed by Barcelona, but it's still the last time we were in the Champions League final, so that has to count for something. I hope we can get back there at some point, and it was still very memorable to watch that game. First United game I watched, as I mentioned before, and the Champions League final. It's either that or the 2-1 win against Watford in the 2018-19 Premier League, because I attended that game live, and to this day it's the only United game I've seen at Old Trafford, or, well, live. It was weird, because Watford, they were really quite dominant, but we still edged out a 2-1 win. I remember that Solskjaer was not too happy at the press conference when a reporter implied that United should have won by more against a team, quote-unquote, like Watford, so that was pretty memorable. What are your thoughts on Sweden at Euro 2012 and the 2018 World Cup? I remember how disappointed I was when Euro 2012 happened, but with the power of hindsight, it was actually a respectable tournament for Sweden, especially now when we can't even qualify for a 24-team Euro. The loss to Ukraine was awful. Then we lost to England despite leading them 2-1 at one point. The win against France was great though, especially seeing Zlatan score the goal of the tournament. That's just, I'll remember that forever. If we drew any of the opening 2 games, we would have advanced, but oh well. We would have lost against Spain in the quarterfinals, but reaching the knockout stage would have been nice. The 2018 World Cup will always have a special place in my heart, despite being hosted by Russia, because Sweden reached the quarterfinals for the first time in 24 years, and I attended every single home qualifying game, so it gave me a level of attachment to the national team I had not felt before. I'll never forget watching Toivonen's last-minute winner against France from the halfway line. When it comes to the World Cup itself, the performance against South Korea was good enough. Marcus Berg did also kind of blow a great opportunity to score, but the job was done and we won, so I don't mind. Next I don't want to talk about it. To this day, I get actual PTSD whenever I see any video just hinting at this game against Germany. Amazing goal, but it shouldn't have been scored, because there was too much added time. The match should have been over already. If I recall correctly, the referee team was even sent home because of it. It was the same referee as in the 2022 World Cup final, actually. Don't ask me how he was awarded that game. Maybe he improved, I guess. Thankfully, justice was served, and we still topped the group after bizarrely beating Mexico 3-0, because, Mexico they had swept the group at that point. They had beaten Germany and South Korea, and we somehow just won 3-0. I was actually on vacation in Croatia and Montenegro during this World Cup, so I watched the win against Mexico on Croatian television, and it was so bizarre to just see. The commentators were Croat, so of course they don't care about Sweden, but they were just basically completely silent when Sweden scored, so I hardly realized that we had done it. A fond memory. And by the time I was at the airport ready to get home, I watched the round of 16 match against Switzerland. We edged out the Swiss thanks to a fortunate deflection. It wasn't a flashy win or anything, but job done. But unfortunately, in the quarterfinals, it was just a completely different Sweden. We had been responsible for eliminating some giants in the qualifiers, but against England, we just lost our focus and lost 2-0, unfortunately. Alright, all-time best Sweden 11. I went with a 4-4-2. It just feels right. I'll just briefly go by my selections and then tell my honorable mentions. In goal we have Ronny Hellström, 3 World Cups, not titles, World Cup participations, and has been voted 4-time European Goalkeeper of the Year. Just an absolute legend. Left back Erik Nilsson, 2 World Cup participations in 1938 and 1950. I believe he is the only player to play at both of those World Cups, on either side of World War II, which is really impressive. And if World War II didn't happen, he could have played at 4 World Cups possibly, which is amazing to think about. He was also in the 1950 World Cup All-Star team, so he's a fine choice as a left back. Okay, our first centre back is Glenn Hysén, 1987 European Defender of the Year, 2 Europa League titles with a Swedish team, IFK Göteborg, which he gets bonus points for. He also has a lot of good experience outside Sweden at Fiorentina and Liverpool, which I value a lot. Joining him, we have Patrik Andersson, just a solid guy, Champions League winner, part of our legendary 1994 World Cup squad. I don't know if it's legendary internationally, but in Sweden it's considered legendary. I don't know if he's considered a Bayern München legend, but he did famously score a last-minute winner with a free kick to secure them the title, so that has to count for something. I appreciate that sort of X-factor, but he's probably primarily remembered for his time in Mönchengladbach. At right back, we have Orvar Bergmark, named Swedish Footballer of the Year the same year we reached a World Cup final. I think that alone earns him a spot. Left wing, we have Lennart Nacka Skoglund, 2-time World Cup medalist as a Swede, and it's also an Inter-legend, so he has to make the team. Next we have Nils Lidholm, part of the legendary Grenoli trio, and all of the entire Grenoli trio has to start, in my opinion. He was voted Sweden's greatest player of the century, so that has to count for something. And he scored the opening goal of the 1958 final. So, for a few minutes, we led the Brazilians, but yeah, then it all came crumbling down. Gunnar Gren, also part of the Grenoli duo and a Serie A legend. He has to start. At right wing, we have Kurt Hamrin, who sadly died this month. So rest in peace. An AIK legend and a Serie A legend and a 1958 World Cup All-Star. He has to start. Yeah, there's only 2 players that we could start, and those are, of course, Gunnar Nordahl, part of the Grenoli trio, and Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Gunnar Nordahl is to this day AC Milan's greatest goal scorer of all time, and the 3rd greatest in Serie A history, and the best if you don't count Italians. So Gunnar Nordahl, just absolutely legendary. And of course Zlatan, Sweden's top goal scorer, even during kind of our banter era, if you could call it that. Played in several top leagues, insane longevity. Arguably the greatest Swedish player of all time. It's either him or Nordahl. I personally think it's Zlatan. He has to start. Alright, now on to the honorable mentions. Bo Larsson, Kalle Svensson, Thomas Ravelli, Björn Nordqvist, Bengt Gustafsson, Fredrik Ljungberg. Yes, the L is silent. Henrik Larsson, Sven Rydell, Hasse Jeppsson, Henrik Karlsson, Glenn Strömberg, Ove Kinnvall, and Sune Andersson. Whew. If Sweden won the Home World Cup in 1958, how do you think it would affect football now in Sweden? It's hard to say, but sadly I think the difference would be negligible. Difficult word, but I love difficult words, even though I can't pronounce them. Yeah, Sweden did win the 1948 Olympics, which at a time when that tournament was considered basically on par with the World Cup. And we didn't see that bring about any long-term success spanning decades. So sadly, I don't think us winning the 1958 World Cup final would have really changed where we are today. If 1934 World Cup took place in another country like Germany or France, would Italy still win that? No, I don't think Italy would have won. Even if we give them the benefit of the doubt regarding corruption accusations, the home advantage by itself likely helped them win the title, even though they did have a great team, of course. These implications are really interesting. Whether Italy were eliminated in the quarterfinals or semifinals, I think Austria would have reached the final, which is fascinating to think about, since it means either they or Czechoslovakia would win the World Cup, which neither did in our timeline. A really interesting alternate history scenario. Which is the most underrated national team currently? Really difficult to say, because the word underrated has been completely destroyed. If everyone says a team or player is underrated, then they clearly aren't. But I will try to answer. I guess maybe Austria. I think Austria are really good, but too few people give them credit. You do have teams like Denmark, even though they're in a bit of a slump right now, Scotland and Hungary, etc. But I feel like people do give them credit. But I haven't heard nearly enough people mention Austria, who will definitely be a team to watch out for at the next Euros. Who did must host FIFA World Cup 1942 and FIFA World Cup 1946? I couldn't have said it better myself. A South American country would have almost certainly hosted the 1942 World Cup. Hell, a South American country was supposed to host it in 1938, but were denied their rightful hosting duties, so they boycotted the tournament. Brazil and Argentina would have been the main contenders for hosting the 1942 World Cup. I'm leaning towards Argentina since they had higher stadium capacity. Keep in mind that Brazil had to build a lot of new stadiums to host the 1950 World Cup in our timeline. I've actually made 2 videos explaining who would have won the 1942 and 1946 World Cups respectively, and I addressed these things, so I suggest you look them up if you haven't already. In that video, I do say that I think Brazil would have hosted the 1942 World Cup, but I no longer agree with that. However, there's still a lot of useful information in the videos, and I recommend you watch them. I also recommend you like, comment, and subscribe, because now we've reached the end of this Q&A. Thanks to everyone who sent a question. Hopefully I'll stay for 5 more years and have a 10-year anniversary at some point.